Officer Ronaldo Lawrence saw an easy collar when he spotted Deborah Barry kneeling in her rose garden. He saw a fragile pensioner, perfect for padding his arrest record and impressing the new captain. But he missed the steel in her quiet dignity, and the contact was saved as "My Reaper" on her phone. He thought he was brutalizing a 68-year-old church lady into submission, but he was actually signing his own death warrant. Deborah's son isn't just special forces. He's a Delta Force legend, a shadow operator just one phone call away. This is the story of how a corrupt cop lost his badge, his family, and his freedom because he raised a baton to the wrong mother. The afternoon sun in Riverside hung thick and golden, the kind of light that turned everything amber and made the world feel slower, gentler. But for 68-year-old Deborah Barry, the warmth was simply God's blessing on another day. She was on her knees in the rich dark soil, her hands sheathed in canvas gloves worn soft with 40 years of use, carefully deadheading the Mr. Lincoln roses that cascaded along her chain-link fence like crimson waterfalls. Deborah was a cornerstone of Riverside, a retired church organist who had spent 4 decades coaxing hymns from the pipe organ at New Hope Baptist. She was the woman who still made communion bread from scratch every first Sunday and could quote scripture in a voice that made even teenage boys stop scrolling their phones. She stood barely 5'3", her frame slight and bird-like, with skin the color of polished walnut and silver hair swept back into a dignified bun secured with her grandmother's tortoiseshell combs. She hummed "His Eye is on the Sparrow" in a low, sweet contralto as she snipped a spent bloom. She was content. That contentment shattered with the slam of car doors. Deborah didn't look up immediately. Magnolia Street saw plenty of traffic, delivery trucks, neighborhood kids on bikes, the occasional lost GPS driver. But when she heard the distinctive jingle of equipment belts and the heavy footfalls of boots on pavement, something in her nurse's instinct from decades of volunteering at the church health clinic made her pause. She used the fence post to pull herself upright, brushing potting soil from her floral print apron. A police cruiser sat idling at the curb, engine still running. Not the community liaison officer she knew from the neighborhood watch meetings, Officer Davis, who always accepted her offer of sweet tea. This was a city patrol unit she didn't recognize. 2 officers stepped out. The first was broad-shouldered and thick through the chest, with slicked-back dark hair and a jawline perpetually clenched tight. His uniform strained slightly across his midsection, and his aviator sunglasses reflected the afternoon sun in twin glares. His name tag read Lawrence. The second officer was younger, leaner, with nervous hands that kept adjusting his belt and eyes that wouldn't settle on anything for more than a second. His tag read Chin. "Good afternoon, officers," Deborah said, her voice carrying that particular tone of gracious authority that came from wrangling 4 children and 70 years of choir practice. "How can I help you?" Lawrence didn't respond with pleasantries. He hitched his utility belt higher, his right hand drifting, almost lazily, toward the baton at his hip. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the fence. Keep your hands visible." Deborah's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "I beg your pardon? I'm gardening on my own property. Is something wrong?" "We received a complaint," Lawrence said, his voice flat and mechanical, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. "Narcotics activity. Suspicious individual matching your description in this exact location." For a moment, Deborah thought he must be joking. A small, disbelieving smile touched her lips. "Officer, I'm 68 years old. The only thing I'm distributing is zinnias from my cutting garden to the church altar guild. I said step away from the fence." Lawrence's voice went hard as concrete, and he snapped the retention strap off his baton. The sound was sharp, final. The air changed. The cicadas seemed to stop their droning. "Officer Lawrence," Deborah said, drawing on every ounce of her nurse's training, "stay calm. De-escalate. Speak clearly. I am Deborah Barry. I have been a member of New Hope Baptist for 42 years. I volunteer at the food pantry every Tuesday. You can speak with Reverend Thompson, or you can call Captain Willis at the 2nd Precinct. He knows me. I don't care who you think you know, Lawrence snapped, striding up the cracked concrete path. He unlatched the gate and kicked it open with unnecessary force. The hinges groaned, and the latch clattered against the post. You're interfering with a lawful investigation. Chen, cuff her. The younger officer hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing. Lawrence. She's clearly just doing yard work. Maybe we should verify the address? The tip said. I gave you an order, Chen. Lawrence wheeled on his partner, his face flushing dark. You want to explain to the captain why we let a suspect walk? Write the report yourself. Chen flinched. He pulled his handcuffs free, approaching slowly. Ma'am, please just turn around. This'll be easier if you cooperate. I will do no such thing, Deborah said, planting her feet in the soil of her own garden. She had buried a husband here. She had raised 4 children in this house on a seamstress's wages and faith the size of a mustard seed. She did not back down. I demand to know the basis for this harassment. Lawrence's patience, whatever thin veneer of it existed, evaporated. He lunged forward, seizing Deborah's thin wrist with a grip meant for hardened criminals. He wrenched her arm behind her back with brutal efficiency. There was a sickening, audible crack, like a dry twig snapping underfoot. Deborah's scream split the afternoon wide open, a raw, keening cry of pure agony. My wrist! You broke my wrist! Stop resisting! Lawrence roared, driving her forward into the siding of her own house. Her cheek scraped against the weathered wood, opening a gash that immediately welled with blood. Her gardening shears tumbled into the dirt. I'm not resisting, she sobbed, the pain radiating up her arm in white-hot waves. Please, Lawrence, easy. Chen looked like he might be sick. She's hurt, man. She slipped, Lawrence said coldly, pressing his full weight against her fragile spine. Cuff her. Now. They dragged Deborah Barry, deaconess, organist, mother of 4, beloved neighbor, down her own driveway. Her apron tore on the gate. Blood dripped from her cheek. Her left wrist hung at an unnatural angle, already swelling purple and grotesque. Across the street, Mrs. Chen's phone was already up, camera recording. 2 doors down, Marcus Johnson was dialing 911. They shoved her into the back of the cruiser. The interior was an oven, the vinyl seats scalding. Please, Deborah whispered through her tears, her voice breaking. My blood pressure medication, it's on the kitchen counter. I need it. Should have thought about that before you decided to run a drug operation, Lawrence said, slamming the door so hard the car rocked. The holding cell at the Riverside City precinct smelled like industrial disinfectant and stale fear. They hadn't taken Deborah to the ER, despite the grotesque swelling in her wrist and the blood still drying on her face. They'd booked her, taken her fingerprints with her good hand, and thrown her into a concrete cell with a steel bench and a toilet with no seat. She sat cradling her injured arm against her chest, shaking not just from pain, but from shock and humiliation. She had never been handcuffed in her life. She had never missed a single Sunday service in 42 years. An hour crawled by, then 2, then 3. Finally, Officer Chun appeared at the bars. He looked guilty. His eyes couldn't quite meet hers. He held a small paper cup of water. Here, he whispered, sliding it through the gap. I told the sergeant about your wrist. He said someone's coming to check on you. Deborah looked up at him, her face streaked with dried tears and blood. Young man, she said, her voice trembling but clear. You know this is wrong. You know I did nothing. Chun stared at his boots. Lawrence, he's got seniority. Can't look, you get one phone call. Do you have a lawyer? Deborah closed her eyes. She didn't need a lawyer. Not yet. A lawyer would file motions and talk about arraignments and preliminary hearings 6 weeks from now. She needed something faster. Something absolute. I need my phone, she said. I can't give you your cell, Chin said. Policy. Then dial the number for me, Deborah commanded. It wasn't a request. Go into my contacts. Look for my Reaper. Chun hesitated, then pulled her confiscated smartphone from the evidence bag clipped to his belt. He unlocked it, no passcode, just a photo of 4 grown men in military dress uniforms as the wallpaper. He scrolled through the contacts. My Reaper. Is he a lawyer? Chin asked. Something like that, Deborah lied. Chin dialed. He put the phone on speaker, holding it up to the bars. It rang once. Mama. The voice on the other end was deep, calm, and lethally alert. Not the drowsy voice of someone interrupted during off hours. The sharp, crystalline tone of a man who is always mission ready. Deborah let out a sob she'd been holding back for 3.5 hours. Marcus. The silence on the other end was instantaneous and terrifying. The background noise, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors, the low hum of tactical chatter, seemed to drop into a vacuum. Mama, why are you crying? The voice dropped half an octave. Where are you? Baby, I'm in jail. Jail? The word was spoken like a computer processing a system error. Which jail? Riverside City Precinct. The officers came to my house. They said I was selling drugs, Marcus. Her voice broke. They broke my gate. She took a shuddering breath. I think they broke my wrist. Who? One word. Flat. Final. Officer Reynaldo Lawrence. She whispered. He hurt me, baby. He threw me down. They won't let me see a doctor. On the other end of the line, 2,800 miles away at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Master Sergeant Marcus Reaper Berry stood up from his mission briefing table. The ready room went silent. The room was full of Tier 1 operators. Bearded, scarred men who'd hunted war criminals and dismantled terror cells across 4 continents. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't curse. He went perfectly, terrifyingly still. Put him on the phone, Marcus said. Who? Deborah asked. The cop. Put him on. Chun, listening on speaker, felt ice water flood his veins. He pulled the phone back. Achelu? Who is this? Officer Chun, is it? The voice sounded like a serrated blade being drawn across stone. You're holding my mother. Look, sir. She's being processed for. Listen to me very carefully. The voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My name is Master Sergeant Marcus Berry, United States Army, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, Delta. You have exactly 8 minutes to get my mother medical attention and release her from that cell. Chen's throat went dry. Sir, I can't just. 8 minutes. Marcus cut him off. And Chen? Tell Officer Lawrence to enjoy wearing that badge while he still can. Because I'm already inbound. The line went dead. Chun stared at the phone like it had turned into a live snake. He looked at Deborah, who had stopped crying. She was watching him with an expression that was equal parts pity and inevitability. You should have let me finish my roses, she said softly. Master Sergeant Marcus Reaper Berry didn't slam the phone down. He set it gently on the tactical planning table, a movement that was far more terrifying to the men in the room than if he'd put his fist through the wall. The briefing room at JSOC Bragg was dead silent. Ghost, said Sergeant First Class Tyrell Smoke Davis. a mountain of a man who'd been Marcus's spotter in Mosul. "What's the sitrep?" Marcus turned. His face was a mask of cold, surgical fury. "Local PD in Georgia. They picked up my mother. Accused her of drug trafficking. Broke her wrist. Denied medical." A ripple of disbelief went through the room. These men had faced down cartels, warlords, and black site interrogators. The idea of Deborah Barry, who sent them all hand-knitted scarves and prayer cards every Christmas. Being a drug dealer was obscene. "They laughed about it," Marcus added, his voice dropping to a whisper that could cut steel. Smoke stood up, cracking his knuckles. "We're on stand down until Thursday. I can have a four-man element in full kit rolling south in 30 minutes. "No," Marcus said, raising a hand. "We don't do this the cowboy way. Not yet. If we roll in hot, they bury the evidence and spin a narrative about militarized overreach. I need to dismantle them. I want their badges, their pensions, and their freedom. I want to burn their world down using the very laws they think will protect them." Marcus pulled out his encrypted satellite phone. He didn't dial 911. He didn't call the local FBI field office. He dialed a number that fewer than 50 people in the country possessed. "Senator Monroe," Marcus said when the line connected. Senator Diane Monroe was a force of nature in Washington, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, former prosecutor, and a woman who owed Marcus her life. 3 years ago, Marcus had extracted her from a collapsed UN compound in Kabul when everyone else said it was a suicide mission. "Marcus." Her voice was warm but instantly alert. "This isn't a social call." "No, ma'am. I'm cashing in." The warmth vanished, replaced by cold steel. "Name it." "Riverside Police Department, Georgia. 2 officers, Ronaldo Lawrence and his partner Chun. Assault on an elderly civilian. False arrest, excessive force, denial of medical care for a 68-year-old woman with a broken wrist." He paused. "The woman is my mother." There was a beat of silence. Then, "I'll call the Attorney General personally. DOJ Civil Rights Division will have boots on the ground before sunrise. I'll also reach out to the governor. He owes me from the infrastructure bill. That precinct will be crawling with federal agents by morning." "Appreciate it, Senator." "Marcus." Monroe's voice softened slightly. "How's your mother?" "Alive," Marcus said. "For now, that's enough. But Lawrence." His voice dropped into the register that enemy combatants heard right before the lights went out forever. "He's going to wish I'd just put a bullet in him." Deborah Barry's days moved with the rhythm of a well-worn hymn. She rose every morning at 5:30, before the sun gilded the rooftops of Magnolia Street, and padded barefoot to her kitchen to brew Maxwell House in the same percolator she'd received as a wedding gift 44 years ago. By 6, she was in her garden with her canvas gloves and Japanese pruning shears, checking her Mr. Lincoln roses for aphids and deadheading the spent blooms while the mockingbirds serenaded her from the eaves. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock, she walked the 4 blocks to New Hope Baptist for choir practice. She wasn't the director anymore. That had passed to young Sister Wallace 3 years back. But Deborah still held down the alto section with a voice that Reverend Thompson called honey over gravel. She knew every verse of every hymn in the red-backed hymnal by heart. Wednesday evenings belonged to Bible study in her living room. Mrs. Chun from across the street brought her famous 7-layer dip. Mr. Marcus Johnson brought his worn leather Bible with passages underlined in 3 colors of ink. Deborah served sweet tea in her grandmother's crystal pitcher and guided them through Corinthians or Psalms with the patience of someone who'd taught Sunday school for 30 years. They'd pray together, holding hands in a circle on her floral sofa, and she'd send them home with slices of pound cake wrapped in foil. It was a small life, a quiet life, but it was hers, built brick by brick on faith, community, and the roses that bloomed faithfully every June. Officer Ronaldo Lawrence had been watching Magnolia Street for 3 weeks. Not officially, there was no case file, no captain's orders. But he'd noticed the changes. The coffee shop on the corner that used to be a laundromat. The white couple jogging past with a designer stroller. The real estate signs promising historic charm and investment opportunity. Gentrification meant new residents who called about every unfamiliar face. Every car parked 5 minutes too long. It meant easy arrests that looked good on paper. He'd fabricated the call himself that Tuesday afternoon, radioing in a suspicious activity report from an anonymous neighbor describing narcotics distribution by an elderly black female in a floral apron. Dispatch logged it without question. Chun, his rookie partner for the past 6 months, knew better than to ask too many questions. Lawrence had 17 years on the force and a file full of commendations that conveniently overshadowed the excessive force complaints buried in union arbitration. As they pulled up to the tidy house with its explosion of red roses, Lawrence felt that familiar surge of power. This was easy work. Elderly woman, alone, probably terrified of police. She'd fold immediately, maybe even consent to a search. If he found nothing, he'd write it up as unfounded but suspicious behavior noted. If she resisted even slightly, well, that was resisting arrest. Either way, it padded his numbers and sent a message to the neighborhood. This street was still his jurisdiction. He stepped out of the cruiser, adjusting his belt, already scripting the encounter in his mind. He never considered that this particular garden might contain something far more dangerous than roses. The argument lasted less than 2 minutes before it turned violent. Lawrence had backed Deborah against her porch railing, barking questions she couldn't answer because they made no sense. Where were the drugs? Who was her supplier? How long had she been running product through the neighborhood? His breath smelled like coffee and something chemical, and his face had gone red with theatrical rage. "I'm calling my pastor," Deborah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She turned toward her porch where her phone sat on the wicker table beside her gardening gloves. "Don't you move," Lawrence shouted. But Deborah had spent 4 decades working in church outreach, navigating city bureaucracy and hospital administrators. She knew her rights. She took 1 step toward her phone. Lawrence's baton came off his belt in a fluid motion, muscle memory from 1,000 drills. He swung it in a tight arc, not at her head, that would be too obvious, but at her outstretched hand. The impact sounded like a branch snapping in a winter storm. Deborah's scream was primal, ripped from somewhere deep in her chest. She crumpled, cradling her shattered wrist as white-hot agony exploded up her arm. The bones had separated, visible through the swelling skin. Her phone clattered down the porch steps. "I said don't move." Lawrence was already spinning the narrative, his voice loud enough for Chun and any potential witnesses. "Stop resisting arrest." "I wasn't," Deborah sobbed, her knees buckling. "I wasn't." Lawrence grabbed her good arm and wrenched it behind her back, driving her face first into the porch railing. Blood bloomed across her cheek where the wood split her skin. Chun stood frozen at the gate, his hand hovering near his radio, his face the color of old paste. The holding cell was a concrete box that smelled like bleach failing to mask decades of human misery. Deborah sat on the steel bench, her broken wrist cradled against her chest, watching it swell into something grotesque and purple. The bones ground together when she breathed. Every heartbeat sent fresh waves of agony radiating up her arm. She asked for a doctor 3 times in the first hour. The officer at the desk, a woman with dead eyes and a mouth like a trap, told her the medic would come when he came. Hour 2, she asked for ice. They brought nothing. Hour 3, she asked for water. They gave her a paper cup half full from a fountain that tasted like rust. By hour 5, Deborah was praying in whispers, her lips moving through the 23rd Psalm while tears tracked silently down her face. The humiliation was almost worse than the pain. She had never been handcuffed, never been fingerprinted like a criminal, never spent a night away from her own bed except when one of her boys was born. Hour 8. Officer Chun appeared at the bars looking like a man at a funeral. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "You get one phone call," he said quietly, unlocking her confiscated phone from an evidence bag. Deborah's voice was barely a whisper. "My contacts. Look for my Reaper." Chen's hands shook slightly as he scrolled and dialed. The phone rang once. "Mama." Deborah's composure shattered. 42 years of widowhood, of strength, of being the rock everyone else leaned on. It all crumbled. "Baby," she sobbed. "I need you." Marcus didn't leave the briefing room immediately after hanging up with Senator Monroe. He stood at the tactical planning table, the same table where he'd mapped kill boxes in Kandahar and hostage extractions in Mosul, and began plotting a different kind of operation. This one would be surgical, legal, and absolutely devastating. "Smoke," he said quietly. "I need you to pull every piece of public record on Riverside PD. Complaints, settlements, disciplinary actions. I want to know if Lawrence has done this before." His second call went to the governor's chief of staff, a woman named Patricia Odoms who'd been Marcus's tactical liaison during the state's hurricane evacuation crisis 2 years ago. He'd pulled her nephew out of floodwaters when the National Guard said it was too dangerous. She answered on the first ring. "I need the governor to make a call," Marcus said without preamble. "Riverside Police Department. Full state investigation. Use the words pattern and practice." "Consider it done," Patricia said. "When?" "Tonight." His third call was to Rebecca the Hammer Chen, a civil rights attorney who'd built her reputation destroying corrupt police departments from Baltimore to Atlanta. She'd offered Marcus a job as an investigator 3 times. He'd declined. Now he was calling in a different kind of favor. "Rebecca, I'm sending you a case. Elderly black woman, broken wrist, false arrest, denial of medical care. The defendant is Riverside PD. Damages." Rebecca's voice sharpened with interest. "I want everything. Badge, pension, freedom. I want him in federal prison." "Who's the client?" Marcus's voice went flat. "My mother." There was a pause. Then, "I'll have the complaint filed by morning." "And Marcus?" "He's already done." Marcus arrived at Riverside City Precinct at 11 o'clock the following morning, dressed in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain black shirt, and boots that had walked through 3 war zones. He didn't go inside. He simply leaned against his rental car in the parking lot and waited. Officer Ronaldo Lawrence emerged at 11:47, end of shift, still wearing his uniform. He was laughing at something his partner said, jangling his keys. He didn't notice Marcus until he was 10 feet from his personal vehicle. "Officer Lawrence." Lawrence turned. For a moment, confusion flickered across his face. Who was this stranger in his parking lot? Then recognition dawned from the phone call, from Chen's pale face yesterday, from the way this man stood with absolute stillness. "You're Master Sergeant Marcus Berry," Marcus said quietly. He didn't move from where he leaned. "You put your hands on my mother." Lawrence's jaw tightened. His hand drifted toward his duty belt. "You threatening a police officer?" "No threats," Marcus said, his voice conversational, almost pleasant. "Just information. Right now, FBI agents are executing federal search warrants inside your precinct. Your dashcam footage, your arrest records, your locker, all of it. The DOJ Civil Rights Division opened an investigation at 6 a.m. this morning. And my mother's attorney filed a federal lawsuit an hour ago." Lawrence's face drained of color. Marcus pushed off the car, closing the distance until they were face to face. When he spoke again, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You broke my mother's wrist and left her in a cell for 8 hours. So I'm going to break your entire life. Slowly, legally, completely. He stepped back, heading toward his car. Enjoy your badge while you still have it. Saturday morning broke clear and cool over Magnolia Street. By 8 o'clock, 23 neighbors had gathered in Deborah's front yard with shovels, wood glue, fresh paint, and flats of new roses from the garden center. Mrs. Chun organized teams with the efficiency of a field general. Mr. Marcus Johnson repaired the gate's splintered hinge while his teenage grandson reset the fence posts Lawrence had kicked loose. Sister Wallace from the choir arrived with her pickup truck loaded with topsoil and mulch. Deborah sat on her porch in a wicker chair, her casted wrist resting on a pillow, watching through tears as her community rebuilt what had been destroyed. Someone had brought folding tables laden with sweet tea, fried chicken, and pound cake. It looked less like a work detail and more like a homecoming. You just rest now, Miss Deborah, Mrs. Chun said, squeezing her good hand. We got this. Across town, in a split-level house with a mortgage 3 months behind, Ronaldo Lawrence sat at his kitchen table staring at 2 pieces of paper. The first was a divorce petition his wife had served him that morning, her lawyer's card paper-clipped to the front. The second was a notice from his bank. All accounts frozen pending federal investigation. Suspected proceeds from criminal activity. His phone buzzed. A text from his union rep. Don't talk to anyone. FBI seized the server. They have everything. Lawrence looked at his service weapon on the counter. 17 years on the force. Gone. His marriage. Gone. His pension. Frozen. All because of one old woman and her roses. The federal courtroom in Atlanta was packed when the trial began on a Tuesday morning in late September. Rebecca the Hammer Chun presented her case with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. First came the Ring camera footage from Mrs. Chen's doorbell across the street. Crystal clear video showing Lawrence dragging Deborah from her garden. The swing of his baton, her scream, the unnatural angle of her wrist. Dr. Morrison from Riverside General testified next, holding up x-rays that showed a complete transverse fracture of both the radius and ulna. Consistent with blunt force trauma from a baton strike, he said. The 8-hour delay in treatment caused permanent nerve damage. Lawrence sat at the defense table in a suit that hung loose on him. He'd lost 20 pounds since his suspension. His attorney, a union-provided lawyer named Graves, kept objecting. The judge kept overruling. Then Rebecca called Officer David Chun to the stand. Lawrence's head snapped up. Chun wouldn't meet his eyes. Officer Chun, Rebecca said calmly, did you witness the events of that day? Yes, ma'am. And is there dashcam footage from your patrol vehicle? Chen's voice was barely audible. Yes, ma'am. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit F. The courtroom went silent as the video played. It showed Lawrence in the precinct parking lot before the call, pulling a small baggie from the evidence locker and pocketing it. Then, at Deborah's house, planting it in her garden shed while Chun stood watch. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts. 22 years. Federal prison. Lawrence didn't make a sound when they led him away in chains. Marcus submitted his retirement papers 6 weeks after the verdict. 20 years of service, honorable discharge, full benefits. He'd given enough to the shadows. His mother needed him in the light. He used his savings and a small business loan to open the Riverside Veterans Outreach Center in a converted church hall 3 blocks from Deborah's house. It offered free counseling, job placement, and a place where men and women who'd seen too much could talk to someone who understood. Marcus ran it with the same precision he'd brought to mission planning, except now the objective was healing instead of elimination. Deborah's roses bloomed that spring more beautiful than ever, their crimson petals so abundant that neighbors walking past would stop to take photographs. She tended them every morning with her good hand, the other still weak from nerve damage but improving slowly. Marcus often joined her, kneeling in the soil beside his mother the way he had as a boy, before the army had taught him to be a weapon. 300 miles away, in a federal correctional facility in South Carolina, Reynaldo Lawrence pushed a cart of dirty linens through the prison laundry. The industrial washers roared like jet engines. The heat was suffocating. He earned 13 cents an hour. Every penny was automatically garnished and deposited into an account managed by Rebecca Chen's firm, slowly paying down the $3.2 million settlement. 22 years stretched ahead of him like an endless corridor. Sometimes, late at night in his cell, he could still see those roses, still hear that old woman scream, still feel the moment when his entire world had begun its irreversible collapse. All because he'd raised a baton to the wrong mother. All because he underestimated the quiet woman in the garden. If this story moved you, or if you believe that nobody should be above the law, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to share these important stories with the world. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family to remind them that karma is real and it is watching. And if you want more stories about justice, revenge, and the heroes walking among us, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe and watch out for each.